Hello everyone, I'm Colin Canet. Today we're going to make a quick and functional little jig for making shelving holes in cabinetry. And a quick reminder, if you haven't already subscribed, I invite you to do that, and let's get started making this little jig. Now, before we ever get started drilling any holes for shelving brackets, there's a few things that you need to know. The very first thing is make sure that you purchase your hardware ahead of time. And the reason for that is the little ends that these fit into, these little shelf brackets fit into, there's a few different sizes. So you need to know what size you're going to be working with. So when you pick them up, make sure that you know that. What we're going to be working with today, I really like this little system. It uses a collar like this, and they come in a couple of different colors as well. So you drill a hole and the collar goes in, and then the shelf bracket goes in. The reason I like this so much, first of all, it looks nice, but also there's no wear and tear on the hole, so you make sure that your bracket always fits in there nicely. Now, the other thing that you're going to need to know is, of course, what the width of the material is that you're using, because where you put your brackets is going to determine sort of how far from the edge you want to put them. Now, the main body of the jig today is going to be this piece of 3/4 inch plywood, and basically I'm just going to go to the table saw, I'm going to cut it in half, and then we're going to glue the two halves together. While I was at the table saw, I cut one more little piece, and I'm just going to take a second now and glue these all up. Okay, that's all glued up. I'm just going to let it sit for a couple of hours. I only put a spring clamp on there, and I'm just letting the weight of this do the glue up down here, and that's all we'll need. So you can see my base for this jig is all glued up, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drill two holes, and they're going to be about 2 inches from. I've measured this, and I'm going to go about 2 inches just because that's a nice number that I often work with. But I'm going to drill two holes, one here and one about here, and I'm going to measure them to probably be about 3 inches or so. Now, the reason that we use two sheets of 3/4 inch plywood, a few reasons. First of all, it gives us a much firmer base so that the drill bit can't wander around. It gives us a nice thick base to work with, so there's less wear in this when we use two pieces of plywood like this. And that's one of the problems with this system, is because we're using metal drill bits in wood, eventually these holes start getting a little bit sloppy, and after a time you'll need to redo the whole jig or come up with a different system, because these only work so long before the holes get too sloppy and the pins just stop lining up anymore. So something that you need to be aware of. The other thing, if you can see, this is a brad point drill bit, and it's important to use this, and the reason for that is even if you're clamping this down, you don't want that drill bit to wander around. If your drill bit is not absolutely sharp, it can wander around, and that will also help to enlarge that hole in your jig here. So you really want to use a brad point bit for doing this, because that will help save the wear and tear in the hole. So the next thing I need to do, I'm going to measure where I'm going to drill holes. Then I'm going to go over to the drill press, and we'll set up a little fence, and we'll drill those two holes out. I'm even getting a chance to try out my mag switch fence that I made in the last video. So there's the jig with the two holes, and I've cut a piece of doweling, and either one of these can be the indexing hole and the other one will be the drill hole. Now, this indexing dowel, you can have it drive it in so that it stays in there, or you can move it, and I've made mine quite long so that I can pull it out and move it along that way. Now, this one is not going in, as you can see, so what I'm having to do is, with some sandpaper, just sand it down so that it fits in there snugly. Okay, I finally finished that dowel, and you can hear that it bottoms out. And it moves up and down. It's a little snug, but that's how I want it to be. Now, the next thing I need to do is I need to figure out the depth that I'm going to use. Okay, now I've set the collar here, and I'm using this wooden collar, and it's to prevent the drill bit from going deeper. And that's precisely what I want to talk to you about. See how that wobbles like that? It's almost impossible to get these perfectly in the center, and even when you do, they still, every time they touch the wood that they're going into, they will often stop, and they won't move like that. They'll actually stop. And every time they do, there's wear on the inside to the point where they get so loose they start falling off. And when you're doing multiple holes like this, you don't want to do that. The other thing is, look at the chalk that this is on. It's almost pointed. And every time you push against that, you start, in this case, you can actually start grinding into that. So you can end up not only with this falling off, but you can also end up with getting sort of a false reading from this, a false depth. So here's what I recommend. At some point, get yourself, you can buy them in sets. You know what? They're pretty inexpensive. They're very inexpensive. This set that I've got is probably 15 or 20 years old, maybe more, and I use them a lot, and they're just a metal collar. They fit on. You don't have to worry about them coming loose. You tighten them up with a little set screw, and they actually stay there. And you know what? They really don't do anything. Make sure that you put them so they can't damage your thread, but it's usually so far up that all this is doing up here is just taking wood chips out anyway, so you're really not doing anything to harm your drill bits. So just a little tip on stops for drill bits. Okay, we're all ready to start drilling some holes, and because my index holes are the same on both sides, I can actually reverse this jig back and forth, which is what I'm going to do. But what I didn't show you is when I made these holes, I put some lines, I carried on the lines all the way along, so that when I get to a point that I need to start drilling holes, and whenever you're making holes for shelving, they never go to the very top. They always start sort of 5 or 6 inches from either end. So I've just marked a reference mark here. There, I think you can see that. So I'm going to start at that reference mark on this side. Then I'm going to flip it around, and we'll do the same on the other side. So I'm going to drill the first hole right there and line that up with that line. And now I can actually flip my index peg down there and drill my first hole here. And now I can either lift this up and move it along, or I can just let it sit proud like that, and I can just move it along so that it drops into the next hole like that. There's a bit of, there we go. Okay, that's all the holes I'm going to drill on that side. Now to reverse it, we basically do the same thing on the other side. Pull it around, and now you can actually see that mark. I'm going to put the same mark on that my same starting hole that I had there. And now I can put my indexing peg there, and now I can move up the same way and drill holes on this side. And there's what those pins look like, and it's a little snug putting the collars in, and that's how it should be, and then the pins go on top. Well, that concludes my video on making the little jig for making shelving brackets. And you know, there's lots of different ways of making these holes. This is just one way, and it might be something you want to try out sometime in your workshop. I'm Colin Canet for Woodwork Web. Thanks for watching.